I have a Bachelor of Science in Geology from Bemidji State University. I have graduate studies in geophysics, hydrogeology, geochemistry, and geology, and then a Master of Science of Infrastructure Systems Engineering from the University of Minnesota, where my thesis was response to disasters that affect critical infrastructure.
Okay, can you briefly explain your professional experience?
7 years in the military, where I was a commissioned officer in the field artillery. Many years as a land surveyor. I worked as a driller's assistant for an environmental drilling company. I worked for as an engineering technician and construction inspector for the cities of Crystal, St. Paul, and Minneapolis in Minnesota, where my jobs were involved sewer, water, paving, pumping stations, and bridge construction. Then I went on to private consulting, where as a geologist, where I did environmental work, stormwater work, groundwater work, well field design, pumping system design, some paving, and then moved on to University of Minnesota, the Minnesota DNR, where I was a groundwater specialist and a permitting hydrologist for surface water and groundwater projects, permits, and then moved on to my current occupation as a self-employed geologist and hydrogeologist, where I do environmental remediation, well design, well field design, and surface water work, along with construction inspection and management.
And are you a licensed geologist?
I am a licensed geologist in the state of Wisconsin, state of Minnesota, and state of Arizona, and a registered geologist in the state of Oregon.
And how long have you worked as a geologist?
20-some years.
And does your expert report describe opinions you reached in this case?
It does.
And does your expert report provide the methodology used to reach and the bases for those opinions?
It does.
And have your opinions changed in this matter for any reason since you reached them there?
They have not.
Did you reach an opinion in this matter related to the potential for trenches to convey water?
Yes.
Will you please briefly summarize that opinion?
That a trench, even when it's filled, is a permanent feature in the landscape, and it will convey water much more readily than the undisturbed material.
Mr. Bonin, would you please read aloud lines 8 through 19?
Okay, starting at line 8, there's a question. Do you have an opinion regarding whether DNR correctly concluded that trenching will not have an adverse environmental impact on groundwater flow, and if so, what is your opinion? Mr. Wolo answers, I agree with DNR's conclusion. Trenching will not have an adverse impact on groundwater flow. Short-term trench dewatering will have minimal temporary and very localized effects on hydrology. Additionally, the method of backfill, last out, first in, will not alter the hydrostratigraphy. The last out, first in excavation and backfill method places the deepest excavated soils at the bottom of the trench, and the shallower excavated soils are backfilled last. This method preserves vertical hydrostratigraphy and thereby the hydraulic conductivity or permeability of the deposits and the shallow groundwater flow paths. The liberal use of trench breakers will prevent the trench from functioning as a subsurface drain.
What is hydrostratigraphy?
That is the science of categorizing layers in the earth based on how water flows through them.
Do you agree with the opinion, with Mr. Wolo's opinion that you just read?
I do not.
And why not?
First of all, his characterization of how the trench will be backfilled is flawed. The construction plans and standard construction practice generally calls for, and in case the construction plan specifically calls for, granular material to be added as pipe bedding around the pipe in order to protect the pipe from abrasion and other corrosion and other impacts. This is generally sand, and so this is not the first out, last in. This is additional material that's put in. In addition, as you excavate the material and move it around, you're going to aerate it and basically decompact it. You're going to fluff it up. And when you put that back in, it has to be recompacted. And because there's a pipe in there, you cannot compact that you cannot compact that adequately around the pipe to get it anywhere close to where it was originally, simply because the pipe may be damaged over the course of compacting that. So, and then further, the unexcavated material and the trench, even when it's filled, there's going to be a seam that sits in between the native material and the disturbed material. That's going to act as a fracture and allow the water to go down, allow water to infiltrate through the fracture.
So will the hydrostratigraphy of the proposed trench remain the same as it was before construction?
It will not.
Did Mr. Wallow's pre-filed testimony discuss the efficacy of trench breakers?
Yes.
What is your understanding of his opinion in that regard?
I think he overestimates the effectiveness of trench breakers.
I'm sorry, I was asking you what your understanding of Mr. Wallow's opinion was in that regard.
Yeah, I think he thinks they're a lot more effective than they're actually going to be.
Okay, why do you think that?
First of all, the assumption is that is going to stop the water from flowing along the pipeline. And even the project documents say that it's going to only slow it. Second of all, there are places in the project plans where drains are going to be installed through these, and for good reason. This is for geohazard mitigation, but that's not going to stop the flow at all. That means the water is going to flow through these things. It also fails to take into account the fact that the water can still flow through the trench walls and the trench floor around the trench breakers. And if the trench breaker is actually successful in stopping water that infiltrates through the trench, once that trench becomes saturated, once that trench fill becomes saturated, the water will flow out over the top and out the surface as a kind of spring or seep.
Would you please read the highlighted passage?
Water may seep into the trench sections between trench breakers, but once it reaches a uniform level, that is, the head within the section is the same along its entire length, water cannot flow laterally along the trench. Once this happens, the trench cannot act as a drain.
Do you agree with that statement?
No, because it doesn't describe vertical flow. And vertical flow, once you have a head of water, which means that you're building water pressure, once you have a head of water in a trench like that, it can increase vertical flow up the bottom of the trench.
Did you reach an opinion in this matter related to impacts from dewatering the trench during construction?
Yes.
Will you please summarize that opinion?
I think that the trench has a much higher likelihood of causing dewatering than was put out by the experts that I reviewed.
Like this will take a second, and I'll apologize and appreciate everyone's patience. But I would like you to read lines 6 through 23 on this page, and then 1 to 3 on the next page.
Question: With regard to dewatering, petitioners contend that trenching will lead to dewatering that will lead to adverse environmental impacts to wetlands. Do you have an opinion regarding that conclusion, and if so, what is that opinion? And Wolo's answer: I found petitioners' arguments to be completely without merit, lacking any supporting analysis, and without regard to basic groundwater mechanics. A simple numerical simulation, as presented in my report, Exhibit 302, which is the one we just looked at, shows this conclusion to be false. The reason for this is that when the trench is dewatered, the time required for drawdown of the water table on either side of the trench is a function of two parameters: transmissivity and specific yield. The transmissivity is closely related to permeability. Fine-grained soils, such as silt, clay, organic wetland soils, and fine-grained bedrock, such as the Freda sandstone, have much lower permeability values than unconsolidated sand, typically orders of magnitude lower. Drawdown of the water table is much more restricted to the area adjacent to the trench for low permeability soil and rock. But specific yield is equally as important, because specific yield is a parameter that controls how fast drawdown spreads once dewatering begins. Specific yield is a parameter of the soil that describes how water in the soil pore is drained by gravity. The specific yield of organic soil, for example, is quite high, 10 to 30%. Before the drawdown can spread beyond the immediate trench area, the water in these pores must drain, and that drainage is a relatively slow process. This is why the short period of time that a section of trench is dewatered has very little effect on groundwater levels beyond the edge of the trench. The use of trench breakers, up gradient, down gradient of a dewatered section, further limits the extent of drawdown.
So do you agree with the opinion that was stated there?
Some of it.
Which parts of that opinion do you agree with?
His description of transmissivity and specific yield are accurate.
And are there parts of it you disagree with?
Yes.
And what are those parts?
First of all, he's using a model to draw a conclusion. A model provides a prediction. He did not show where on the map that that there may be highly transmissive sediments that are being constructed into, such as the sand that I described in the thing. There's going to be areas of sand that is going to be highly transmissive, and that's going to be a problem. And that's what I have a problem with that. He's describing something that may not apply to the project as a whole. He also discounts fractured bedrock and how the water will flow through fine-grained bedrock, like he says. The water won't flow through the actual bedrock, it'll flow through the fractures.
Have you ever observed trench dewatering resulting in hydrological changes?
I have.
Can you elaborate?
In 2018, Bloomington, Minnesota, a gas pipeline was installed in a roadway and then off a roadway for what I'm pretty sure is a valve chamber. It could be a compressor chamber. Either way, there's a structure on it. In order to get the pipeline installed, in order for them to actually construct the pipeline, they had to have a large dewatering, multi-point dewatering project. There were springs located, in some cases adjacent to the actual pipeline, which of course the dewatering took care of, and they were able to build a pipe. They were able to construct a trench, keep it open, and then build a pipe. When they turned the pumps off for the dewatering system, many of those springs disappeared, and brand new springs showed up in the parking lot, garage, and greenhouse of a nearby florist. The water that was once discharged as springs near the pipeline, once the dewatering was turned off, took a bulk of that water and put it into this business's property. And I was investigating that as a member of Minnesota DNR.
Did you reach an opinion in this matter related to aquifer breaches?
I did.
And can you please summarize that opinion?
I think that the risk of aquifer breaches is higher than their experts have assessed.
What construction activities can result in an aquifer breach?
Trench construction and horizontal directional drilling.
Mr. Bonin, this is Exhibit 375, again, which you testified to earlier. Would you please read that for the highlighted sentence from lines 8 to 10 there?
However, even with extensive drilling, there's always the potential to encounter isolated artesian conditions because of the inherent unpredictability of glacial stratigraphy.
Do you agree with Mr. Wollo that glacial stratigraphy is inherently unpredictable?
Yes.
And is glacial stratigraphy present along the proposed pipeline route?
Yes, it is.
And does the presence of that glacial stratigraphy have any bearing on the potential for aquifer breaches?
Yes.
And how so?
Because it is really hard. Now, understanding that with every construction project in glacial, just in general, there are going to be very small scale variations that may impact the project. You're going to find a boulder here or a fracture there or something like that. Whenever you're excavating, there's going to be small scale. However, what we're talking here is medium scale, hundreds, 50 to 1,500 feet, where if you're digging a trench and you think it's going to be in clay, but it's in glacial clay, you can move 50 feet over and dig the same trench and the materials may be substantially different. So that's glaciers are big, complex, dynamic movers of sediment. And that is part of the problem with the glacial sediments. That's why they're unpredictable, because the glacier back in the day moved earth and materials around, both internal to the glacier and underneath it. And then when the glacier melted, it just sort of dumped it in place. And so when a geologist has to, or for that matter, geotechnical engineer has to go and try to assess subsurface conditions in glacial deposits, there's always going to be surprises, and you generally have to look harder for those surprises. There's always going to be the small scale ones, but it's the middle scale ones that can really cause problems. So in this case, there can be sand layers inside of the clay that I discussed previously, and these sand layers can be caused by a beach on the glacial lake that used to be there. It can be a stream inside the glacial till. It can be a sand dune that was on the shore of the glacial lake. And it could be an actual in-ice deposit, such as a came or an esker, which are basically gravel bodies that are similar to the other ones, but each one of these has its own characteristic features that a geologist will be able to identify. And none of them are widespread. They're all either small diameter circles or they are linear features. And trying to find linear features in the subsurface using vertical borings is going to miss something. And so you have to basically look harder and use more borings to find these things, and then use an experienced geologist to interpret the things to figure out exactly what you're dealing with. So because a stream and a beach in this case are going to be oriented in different, or perpendicular to each other.
In your opinion, is there a risk that the project will impact groundwater that is not under artesian conditions?
Yes.
How so?
Construction of a trench can intercept water table flow. So that may be flowing towards a wetland or a spring somewhere nearby. It can also facilitate infiltration through the trench of water that wouldn't otherwise go into the groundwater.
And what impacts can occur if those were risks were to be realized?
If the water table is disrupted and that happens to express itself somewhere down gradient as a spring or a seep, that spring or seep can be either degraded or intercepted entirely. Also, if there's any surface contaminants surface contaminants that are transmitted by water flow that infiltrates the trench and then infiltrates the groundwater system from the trench, that can be a problem too. The trench is going to facilitate that.
I'm going to move on to ask you about blasting.
Okay.
Did you reach an opinion in this matter related to blasting?
I did.
Will you please summarize that opinion?
Blasting is going to have a larger effect than larger impact than the expert reports discussed, and the reason for that is the already fractured bedrock was not taken into consideration in their reports.
Okay, Mr. Bonin, again, this is Exhibit 375 that you testified earlier. We're asking you to read lines 17 through 23 on page 49 there, and then 1 through 3 on the following page.
Do you have a question? Do you have an opinion regarding whether DNR correctly concluded that blasting will not have adverse environmental impacts on groundwater flow? And if so, what is your opinion? Answer: yes, DNR was presented with a thorough and detailed description of the blasting methods used, the locations where blasting will likely be required, and the procedures that will be implemented to install the pipeline in the blasted trench. See Exhibit 815, Enbridge's General Blasting Plan, Appendix F of the final EIS. DNR therefore had the necessary information to, and did, consider all potential environmental impacts of blasting on the right-of-way. Based on this information and analysis, I agree with DNR's conclusion that blasting will not have measurable adverse environmental impacts, including but not limited to impacts on groundwater and hydrology.
Do you agree with Mr. Wolo's opinion that blasting will not have adverse environmental impacts on groundwater flow and hydrology?
No.
And why not?
Because it might have lasting impacts. First of all, the blasted rock is not going to ever be restored, and it's going to form a permanent channel in that rock surface, which is going to be a lot more conducive to infiltration of water. Second of all, he doesn't discuss the impacts of blasts on existing fractures in the rock, which is one of the reasons I added that Forest Service document that describes how water flows through fractured rock in Wisconsin. Because he didn't consider the effects of blasts on existing fractures, and the aquifer in this area, in areas of shallow bedrock, is called the fractured bedrock aquifer. I don't think he properly assessed the risk that the risk to the groundwater could happen from blasting, and further that this risk could be that the effects of blasts, especially on fracture networks, may be permanent. Question: in your opinion, did DNR adequately characterize bedrock mineralogy and geochemistry when evaluating potential environmental impacts of blasting on hydrology and water quality? And Mr. Rollo answered, yes, DNR adequately described bedrock mineralogy and geochemistry when evaluating the impacts of blasting on project hydrology and water quality. These characterizations were based on sufficient information found in the FEIS and elsewhere in the permit record, such as the blasting plan for the project. And he gives an example of, or an Exhibit 815 Appendix F of the EIS.
And do you agree with the opinion that DNR adequately described bedrock mineralogy and geochemistry?
No.
Why not?
Because the EIS and the permit documents did not describe basic geological descriptions of the rocks that they encountered. This would include, degree of weathering, fracturing, visible minerals, cementation, strike and dip. These are all things that a field, basic field geologist should write down in a notebook, and these were not presented as part of the record. So if they were not part of the record, I have no idea if they were done. So.
Could blasting increase the ability of water to permeate through the walls of a trench?
Yes.
How so?
By fracturing by adding fractures to the rock that's there and enhancing fractures that already exist.
And could blasting increase the ability of water to move around a trench breaker?
Yes, through the fractures. The question, do you have a reaction to petitioner's allegations that the use of blasting will permanently alter site conditions such that hydrology will not be capable of being restored to its pre-construction state? The answer, blasting combined with the use of trench breakers will not alter hydrology in the right-of-way such that it cannot be restored following project construction. Indeed, Enbridge has shown that it will adequately restore all impacts based on construction along the right-of-way, including those impacts based on blasting.
And do you agree with that opinion?
No.
And why not?
For a very simple reason. What was once bedrock is now pulverized rock. And there's no amount of engineering that's going to restore that to its original condition.
Did you reach an opinion in this matter related to horizontal directional drilling?
Yes.
Will you please summarize that opinion?
I think that the risks of horizontal directional drilling were understated, and that the site analyses were not done appropriately for the glacial geology and fractured rock conditions.
What is a hydrofracture analysis?
That is a comparison of the operating pressure of the that's required for successful drilling with the calculated maximum pressure that can be tolerated by the local geology conditions.
Did Enbridge or its contractors complete a hydrofracture analysis?
Yes.
Where in the permitting materials can information related to that hydrofracture analysis be found?
That would be in the blasting plan. If I remember correctly, it's the EIS Appendix G.
And do you recognize this document?
Yes.
And what is that document?
That is Appendix G. That's the aquifer analysis and design for horizontal direction drilling.
So not the blasting plan?
No.
Okay. So, and you reviewed this document?
Yes.
So in your opinion, was the hydrofracture analysis that was conducted adequate?
I'm a geologist that supports these, and so I'm not the engineer that actually does them. But in my opinion, as a geologist, I think that it did not.
And can you explain why?
I don't think that the geology, especially considering that it's glacial geology, and there's variabilities that are going to show up just because it's glacial geology more so than anything else. I don't think that these were taken into consideration, and that adequate boreholes or borings were taken to base a design.
Can you explain what this is?
That is the plan and profile for the HDD that's going to go under Deer Creek.
Do you have any observations about this chart?
Yeah, the actual boring path is the curved line that you see in the profile that's below the little map. It's 1,770 some feet long, and there's one boring that's in the drill path for that particular boring. So there's a second, on the left-hand side, you see that a second drill hole was taken that's outside of the drill path, And everything that is in between those two borings is based on interpretation. And that's over a quarter mile of boring that's basically based on one borehole. There are no borings that were taken to the right-hand side, which is north in this particular plan. There's a whole bunch of detail in these borings. There's an answer key down on the lower left. But I'm not going to go into the details there, but what I would draw attention to is the descriptions that are to the left of each boring. And you can just, without even having to read them, you can see that the one in the middle, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 descriptions. And that's a description of the geological materials that they found in that boring. And the horizontal lines separating those descriptions are where the boundaries of those particular stratigraphic units stopped, right? So those are the boundaries. So those are the descriptions of what they found in there. Now compare that to the one on the left, and there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, maybe 13. I'd have to get in there and read them, but let's call it 13. So it's almost double the amount of the stratigraphic units described in that borehole. This is an example of that the unpredictability of glacial geology. Now, for determining how your boring is going to, or for designing this boring, you're going to need to figure out which of those, in this case, they're all sand units, or silty sands, or basically more or less granular. There's not clay in there. You're going to have to figure out which ones are the loose ones and which ones are the dense ones. The loose ones are where the frac outs are going to concern, or mud loss just from drilling. They're going to be the problem areas in a project like this. But which ones are the loose ones? Which ones are the dense ones? Now you have double the amount on the other side. You have to somehow try to do an entire site based on descriptions that don't match. And it's over, less than a quarter mile, about a quarter mile apart. And you don't know what's a quarter mile to the north, to the right side of this. Okay, so now when you're calculating the operating pressure on this, you're going to use an average of the site conditions to base your mud pressure on. And I do not see how, even using a weighted average, you're going to be able to successfully figure out how to do that based on one borehole in the path. That doesn't have an easy correlation with the only other borehole in the area.
Show you one more of these. Okay, can you briefly explain what this is?
Yeah, it's another crossing. This one is Vaughn Creek. This one is a little bit bigger, 2,000 feet. So now we're getting close to a half a mile. This one has 4 borings, but only 2 of the 4 are in the drill path. There's nothing, again, on the north side, which is up to the right, to correlate units that were found in the second bore, or the farthest to the right boring. There's nothing there to correlate that with. They tend to put, on these kind of drawings, they tend to put issues that they had during drilling in red. They also tend to put the details of the directional drill in red, so it can be confusing. But in this case, I can see that there's a layer of cobbles right near the river bottom, or the valley bottom, and that could be a big problem when it comes to directional drilling. They don't know if it's a stream or a beach deposit. It's probably a stream deposit, but there's no way to correlate that to anything to the north or on this profile to the right of that to see if that's something they're actually going to cross. And then also the solid black lines on these drawings are where bedrock was encountered, and if you look closely, you can see that there's 3 different kinds of bedrock described. That's because the bedrock layers here are not horizontal, they're more vertical. There's a strong vertical component. Thank you. You'll see that there's a copper harbor conglomerate, a none such argillite, which is kind of a shale, and then there's a none such sandstone. Now these are all different rock units, and they're all fractured in this area, particularly because they're not horizontal layers, they're not intact, they've been altered. Now, what's interesting to point out is in the second one to the left, is it says that the boring was terminated due to artesian conditions. That means that there was enough groundwater trying to flow up the borehole and up the drill equipment that that they could not proceed anymore. Now, that should have been something where they would have, or at least if it were me, I would have gone out there and done a confirmation boring. I would have restarted it and moved over and see if there's a different fracture, but that didn't happen. So also please note that the elevation of that, the elevation on these drawings is on the far left. You can see that that's in feet above, whatever, let's call it sea level. That's not 100% accurate, but it's close enough for what we're dealing with. And you can see where the boring terminated, and if you estimate the distance between 900 feet and 940 feet, it's less than where they encountered that artesian water is, in terms of elevation, less than 20 feet from the bottom of the HDD path. So it doesn't mean that the water is artesian underneath there, but it definitely should be anticipated.
Did you reach an opinion in this matter related to thermal impacts from operation of the pipeline?
Yes.
Will you please summarize that opinion?
I think the thermal impacts of the pipeline on its surroundings, in particular water, is going to be a lot. The risk of that is going to be a lot higher than was presented.
And why will the risk be higher in your opinion?
Because the risk was assessed based on a model of one site, and I don't have a problem with the model, but the data that was used to run the model did not account for the appropriate site conditions, did not account for the how the pipeline was to be constructed, and then amongst other things. And then, didn't account for the actual use of the pipeline. It only evaluated one liquid flowing through it. And, there's going to be at least 2, as I understand it. And then that model, which was built for one specific site, was applied to the entire project area without any kind of modifications. So furthermore, the model wasn't tested by having a sensitivity analysis to figure out what parameters have the biggest impact on temperature in order to modify the design or even relocate the pipe to avoid those conditions. So if a different model had been used, the same problems would persist because of I think that the output of that model was inappropriate and the data that went into it was incorrect.
And or can any impacts, environmental impacts occur from increased temperatures due to operation of the proposed pipeline?
Yes, trout streams in particular are vulnerable to changes in temperature, especially long-term changes in temperature, or increases in temperature in particular. Also, by changing the temperature of the water, the dissolved gases and dissolved minerals will change. So warm water will not dissolve as much gas as cold water. So if you're, depending on if if your ecosystem is dependent on dissolved oxygen and cold water, by warming it up, it's going to reduce that oxygen level. By warming up water, you're also going to reduce the ability of carbon dioxide to stay in the water, and so you will precipitate carbonate minerals. The further warm water is more likely to be geologically or geochemically reactive with its surroundings. It increases the weathering rate. So, for example, a lot of the mineral deposits that are found in the Gehibic range were not deposited by hot water, it was by warm water. So over time. So it just gives you an idea. It's like just because the water is warm, it can have an effect, especially over long time periods.
What is the Gehibic range?
The part of Wisconsin and Michigan that has historically been mined for iron and copper.
We'll move on. Did you reach an opinion in this matter related to slope stability?
Yes.
Could you please summarize that opinion?
That cutting a trench, whether it's filled or not, cutting a trench into a slope that is composed of erodible soils will increase the risk of slope failure and also of erosion and deposition of sediments related to that.
Did you reach an opinion in this matter related to impacts beyond the construction right-of-way?
Yes.
And would you please summarize that opinion?
I think that the impacts of this project were only considered within the right-of-way. So, in particular, groundwater impacts.
Can there be impacts to groundwater beyond the right-of-way?
Yes.
What sort of impacts?
By changing the hydrology of local groundwater system, by construction, you can either intercept groundwater that is necessary for wetlands or springs or whatever that are outside of the right of way but down gradient. You can intercept and reroute flow that can influence, especially in fractured bedrock, influence shallow wells in the fractured bedrock that may rely on that flow, just because it only, like my additional exhibit said, that not all fractures convey water equally, and if you impact the wrong fracture, it can have effects far from the site. In addition, if a geohazard were to actually fail and you had a big slope failure, that sediment is going to move out of the right of way. It's not going to contain itself to the right of way. Furthermore, if the trench actually degrades a wetland, that wetland may also lie partially or completely outside of the right of way. You don't necessarily need a direct connection with a trench in order for the water to flow into it. It can flow into it laterally. So, if it's a big enough wetland, people aren't necessarily, you don't need to drain the whole thing for it to be influenced. So you can either add water or subtract water and it will degrade. And if the wetland's big enough, it may both be in and out of the right of way. But water flows, so if you have a steady stream of warm water being discharged into a trout stream, it's going to affect the trout stream for some distance. It's not going to be confined to the right of way.